I'm Tom Nachu. Welcome to Fraud Squad. Now, we've all received letters in the mail inviting us to enter lotteries, sometimes promising you a win if you just follow the instructions properly. Now, most of these are very poorly produced and often quickly discarded, but there are some very professionally created and look very authentic. James Ray Houston is a hard-working fraudster who specialized in lottery fraud. He masterminded an international scam that targeted primarily elderly individuals, victimizing thousands.
The amount of victims in the case were overwhelming. I would say tens of thousands of victims. The checks, we found that out from the checks, and we found that out from the mailings that were sent out, but tens of thousands of victims were in this scheme. We were able to determine that they took in from the victims was over $20 million.
The role of the United States Postal Inspection Service is to investigate postal offenses and civil matters related to the Postal Service.
The case against James Ray Houston involved what we'd commonly call a lottery scam. That was at least the major component of it. Under the scam, there were 5 defendants who we charged, who got together, who engaged in a sophisticated effort to steal money from vulnerable victims in the United States and Canada.
The case began when I got information from a bank investigator in relation to one of their customers had been writing checks to lottery organizations, and the relatives of this individual had become suspicious that those lottery organizations might not be legitimate.
With enough information to warrant an investigation, Postal Inspector Sherry Delaney teamed up with IRS agent Timothy Nugent. Nugent pursued the financial trail and was able to quickly ascertain where the money being sent to the lottery fraudsters was actually coming from.
The IRS agent and myself knew all their checks were in the same bank account, going to the same bank account.
The reality of the situation was this was a total scam. While people believed that they were giving money to enter into lotteries and had chances to win millions of dollars, the fact of the matter is they had a chance to win nothing because the defendants kept all of the money for themselves and spent it on themselves and never invested a dime of the money they received from their victims in any chance to win any lottery. James Ray Houston was the principal architect of the scheme at issue in this case, starting way back in the 1980s, and we know he became involved in this particular scam no later than 1990. He set up the companies in Costa Rica that mailed out the solicitations for the lottery.
James Ray Houston was so good at creating these bogus lottery mailings that thousands of people sent in money thinking they were entering actual lotteries. In fact, their money went straight into the pockets of Houston, his son Sonny, and partner Dennis, instead of the intended use, to buy lottery tickets.
My name is Dennis Emmett. My function is to generate the leads, mail out the postcards, and handle it through the first 2 promotions.
Yeah. Now start that last paragraph.
Really depends on how good your postcard is. That's what you really got to go for. The first postcard, you can expect up to maybe 10% to go on a postcard with a $3 offer. Once somebody sends you money, it's hard to get us to stop mailing to you. We would tell people they're playing lotteries, and they weren't. We were just giving them back a little bit of their money to get them to come and play some more.
The IRS agent that I met with, he's the one that actually researched the financial aspect of the case, and he was able to ascertain where the money was going and coming from.
From some of the bank accounts, we were able to obtain other people that were sending checks into this company, and the checks in the account showed multiple names, whether it was Irish Sweepstakes or Eurofund, and it just didn't fit what a legitimate company should be.
Inspector Delaney then began the long and emotionally draining task of meeting with the victims in order to track down the origin of the lottery solicitations. Sadly, every victim was elderly, and breaking the news to them was not easy.
All of them were elderly people that we encountered, and we would interview them why they sent the check. Many of the people believed that they were going to win money.
What's the quickest way to determine if a lottery prize notification is a scam? If there are spelling errors in the letter or the email you received? You never entered a lottery, so it must be a scam. You have to pay a processing fee to obtain your prize. The lottery is sponsored by well-known international companies. Before the break, we asked, which is the quickest way to determine if a lottery prize notification is a scam? If there are spelling errors in the letter or email you receive? You never entered a lottery in the first place, so it must be a scam. You have to pay a processing fee to obtain your prize. Or the lottery is sponsored by well-known international companies. The answer is B. If you never entered a lottery, you can't win. That's the simplest way to tell that you're dealing with a fraudulent lottery scam.
The reality of the situation was that there was no money being invested in trying to win the Irish sweepstakes or any other lottery. And in fact, the defendants pocketed the money after laundering it through Europe and back to the United States.
Each of the lotteries that we looked at, the Shamrock Agency, World Expert Fund, the Bunderschmidt, those were real lotteries. In this scheme, there was no real lotto. There were no real winners.
I received a solicitation in the mail, and return address showed a Shamrock, and it said something about sweepstakes, and it appeared to me to be a legitimate agency. So I bought the chances and entered.
8 different checks to play 8 different lotteries. And all I want you to do is send me 8 stamps so that I can mail them to you. So what you're doing is you're qualifying your people.
And of course, and with the winnings, or at least they came back in the form of checks. Anything from $2 or $3, I think, to $15 or $20. And I was encouraged to reinvest those.
You make them think they're going to get a check. You know, you can't cash the check. They can't use it for anything, but they can use that check as a supplement to the money that they're going to pay to play the lottery.
And at some point, I guess a few months later, what they offered was a pension plan. Said you can take your winnings and the winnings to date and augment that with a check here and there. And when you reach a level, and I believe it was $200 or $300, when you reach that level, the money will stay there for a period of time, and then you'd start receiving, I would start receiving a pension. The pension plan looked like an attractive investment because it would just give me some extra play money for vacation fund, or perhaps gifts to the grandchildren, or maybe little spot improvements to the house.
Victims, to participate in this pension fund, had to pay $1 extra upon every entry. They had to play, I think it was 3 times a month, a particular lottery. Some could contribute or play more, and a portion of that went towards this pension fund. It was somewhat of a savings account for these people. So even if they were not winning the lottery, they felt like they were going to get something back in the end for the people they cared about. The rules on governing the pension fund were so specific that no one could have ever obtained their winnings.
We never found any pensions being maintained. We never saw any winnings ever being paid because there was no lottery tickets ever being bought.
I never received any pension money, and in fact I waited after this qualification period, the investment amount and the qualification period, and I waited a few weeks for the first pension check to come in, and it didn't, so I contacted them. But when I reached that point, and I did contact in writing, I contacted them by mail, and said, okay, now I've paid in enough. And they said, no, the level is such and such. And it was higher. And they said that was the point at which I stopped.
Which of the following is not a real lottery? El Toro, Spain, the National Lottery, United Kingdom, Powerball, USA, or Mega Sena in Brazil? Before the break, we asked, which of these is not a real lottery? El Toro from Spain, the National Lottery from the United Kingdom, Powerball in the USA, or Mega Sena from Brazil? The answer is El Toro from Spain. The name of the national lottery in Spain is El Gordo. El Toro is Spanish for bull.
During the interviews with these victims, it gave me an opportunity to talk to the victims and educate them that participating in foreign lotteries is illegal, that their participation solely was not allowed and should not have been happening in the first place.
I want to be clear. Playing foreign lotteries through the U.S. mail is illegal.
The other part of it was the finances, and that the money was being sent overseas, some to the Netherlands, where one of the schemers was, and a lot to Costa Rica, which was where the main schemers were.
Yes, because it appears to me to be very genuine. Are you sure?
More than 7,000 victims believed that the bank passbooks they were given reflected money they deposited for their pension. Instead, all the money went straight into the bank accounts of Houston and his accomplices.
There's no money.
They had sent in thousands of dollars in some cases. They believed was sitting somewhere in an account just for them, just for their families, so that they could obtain it at a later date.
I'm sorry.
When we interviewed several of the victims, we would ask, why did you believe this is real? What made you believe that you were going to get those winnings? Several victims would say it was the way it was written, the terminology, the font, the style.
One of the hardest things Inspector Delaney had to do on this case was to break the news to the elderly victims that their money was gone. One 91-year-old woman turned out to be a great help. She had kept meticulous records of every letter she'd ever received.
I went to the lady's house. She lived in an elderly care center in a very poor part of the city. I went to go see her, very nice lady. She said she was 91 years old. And I went to tell her what I was doing. I told her I was investigating the scheme, and I asked her if she played the foreign lottery. She goes, oh, yes. And I said, have you ever won? She says, no. Did you come to give me my money? I said, no. I said, how long have you played? She said, 4 years. I have the records. If you have money, I can show you. I have records. She opened up her closet door. She had kept every single letter in order on her closet shelf, every single one. She noted the date she wrote the check. She had written notes. Sometimes she even had copies of letters she had written to the company to say, where's my money? I'm waiting for my money.
I've been investigating this for a while now, and it just keeps happening. And they usually target the elderly.
But why wouldn't they tell me that? Why wouldn't they tell me they didn't want my money?
They do want your money. They just don't want to give you any money.
And then I tried to tell her and explain to her, this is a fraud. There is no money. You need to stop paying. She goes, no, I'm counting on it. She said she never sees her kids. She's all alone. She's counting on this money. She goes, sometimes I don't eat because I know I'm going to win this money.
Here's another one from another country.
How much money?
So I talked to her, and then as I'm trying to get her to understand this is a fraud, and she said, at least I have this, and showed me a passbook. She said, I have this pension fund. This is there, even if I don't win. I have been playing for every single week. I have money for my grandkid. And she showed me this passbook. And I had to tell her that that was fraud too, and that there was no money to be had. My heart was broken.
A lot of the victims, they lost their livelihoods. They lost everything that they had ever worked for. So it's very important to us to make sure that we saw the case through, to really bring something back, so they at least had some sense of hope that law enforcement is really there on their side.
We do know that some of the money that stayed here on shore and in the United States was used to pay for property, to pay for colleges for their kids. But the money was primarily sent overseas, which is where the schemers were, and we weren't able to touch that money.
We just used the money to promote and to promote it more, put it back in, promote it more, and living. You can see people, their writing is just almost not legible. You can't hardly read what they're writing. 75–80% of the people that will continue playing with you. Little slow or not on the ball, no, that did not disqualify you. That's an addiction, just like your state lotteries are an addiction, but these people typically aren't out that much, I guess, to go to the lottery tickets. They feel like they belong somewhere, I think.
The organizer of the entire scheme, James Ray Houston, got a sentence of 10 years. Some of the reason that I believe he got a sentence that large was the fact that the victims wrote letters to the court talking about the impact of this scheme upon them, as well as some of the victims actually testified in court in front of the judge. During the sentencing of the main organizer, James Ray Houston, his attorney made a plea to the judge saying, my client is in a wheelchair, my client is elderly, my client is in poor health, he shouldn't receive such a great sentence.
In a lottery scam, fraudsters will tell you that in order to collect your cash prize, you have to pay various fees and taxes up front. True or false? Before the break, we asked a true or false question. In a lottery scam, fraudsters will tell you that in order to collect your cash prize, you have to pay various fees and taxes up front. The answer is true. The real goal of a lottery scam is to convince a person that they've won the lottery and that legal and other fees must be paid to collect the prize. These fees are completely bogus. After all, there was never a cash prize in the first place. Houston asked for leniency because he was in a wheelchair and he was elderly. The prosecutor told the court the irony of this man to make such a plea. The man preyed on people in his exact position. He preyed on those people who were elderly, preyed on those who were bedridden. He preyed on people who were not in good health. And he made money for years off these people.
In my opinion, the most repulsive and outrageous part of this crime is the defendants in this case, although they admitted their guilt, showed no remorse to me. I observed no sense that they had any ill feeling that they were hurting elderly people time and time again. To them, it was merely a business.
The victims, probably the most important thing to remember is if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. Get a second opinion before you do any of this.
I would like people to be more diligent when you're visiting the elderly, when you're visiting your relative. Pay attention because they're not going to talk about it, and it's up to all of us to reach out and help them.
Inspector Delaney did a great job in investigating the Houston case.
Now, Fraud Squad is taking it to the streets to hear your stories.
My grandma has a subscription to a book company that tells her she's going to win $1 million, and they keep sending her these letters with fake checks on them saying that she's going to win, and she sends them money and buys products from them in the hopes that she'll win, but of course she'll never win. It's kind of like the lottery, but she really thinks she's gonna win, and they put her name on the check.
He bought a computer, and he was convinced this is a computer for $600 on Queen Street, and we opened it up at home, and it was a phone book. Yeah, and I mean, I believed it. Yeah. I said, for sure, that's a computer. I mean, how can you not believe the packaging was perfect?
Traveling through Hanoi in Vietnam, just got to be a bit careful of the taxi drivers. We turned up at the train station at about 3 a.m. in the morning. Got what we thought was a pretty reputable taxi. Driving along, I'm studying the map, making sure the driver's not taking us a dodgy way. And the whole time he's sitting there, he's got one of his hands under his chair, just clicking this little button. And every time he clicks it, the meter goes up by another couple of dollars.
Somebody hacked into somebody else's email and sent an email to every one of their accounts that said, "I'm sorry I didn't mention to you, I went to Spain on vacation and to do a course or something like that." And what ended up happening is I got mugged at the airport. Now I'm staying in my hotel. I'm in Spain at this time. Please send me 2,200 euros so I can pay my hotel bill and this and that and the other. And it's somebody you know, because they hacked into their email. It was like our building inspector or somebody that we would never, like, why would they ask us for money? Like, you know, because obviously they don't know who's who on their list. They just email everybody. But yeah, that scam happened too, remember?
Well, we've come to the end of another episode of Fraud Squad. Remember, we're fighting fraud together.